Hi, I'm RJ Gick, and for my honors project, I decided to talk about 14 CFR Regulation 61.160. Regulation 61.160 is about the amount of hours and the requirements to get a restricted ATP certificate. This is to be able to go fly for the airlines, to fly in jets, to fly in the bigger planes. It's for a lot of people, it's the step up. And in the past, you only really needed a commercial certificate to get your to fly in the airlines as a first officer. You only needed a commercial certificate, so you needed the 250 hours to come with that, and that was all. And then there'd been a lot of problems in the aviation industry, but Colgan Air flight 3407 was the big accident that caused these to increase. And for the new requirements for a restricted ATP became 250 hours as a PIC or a second in command performing as a PIC, 200 hours of cross country time, 100 hours of those being PIC, 100 hours flying at night, and 25 hours of the night being PIC, 75 hours of instrument time, and then 50 hours in a class or a ground school, anything like that. Now, these change depending on some of your background positions. As a US military pilot or a former US military pilot, as long as you were not dishonorably discharged or released because of non proficiency and unable to complete the tasks, you only need 750 hours total time if you can provide the right documentation. If you graduate from a institution approved by the FAA administrator, then and you graduate with a bachelor's degree, then you only need 1,000 hours of total time to be able to get your restricted ATP. And if you only graduate with an associate's degree, then you need 1,250 hours to get your restricted ATP, or 1,500 hours total time as a pilot. These, along with the 1,500-hour rule, were the new, after Colgan Air, were the new requirements to come in to be here. So this both helped and caused problems because, one, there's more training, there's more want of the people to do it. They've been working harder for it. But then again, there's more to be able to do it, so there's going to be less people able to do it. There's going to be This caused a huge need for pilots. The pilot community grew smaller in the airlines, and there was more of a demand. Now, Colgan Air is the big accident. This is the accident, and Colgan Air is an accident where a plane flew and stalled on the approach. It was the ILS for runway 23 in Buffalo, and they stalled on the approach and ended up, the pilot and the first officer both did things wrong, and they ended up stalling, crashing down into the ground, and landing in a house. And all 49 of the people on board, passengers and crew, died. And then the husband in the house also died. The wife and the child both got out with minor injuries, but the husband died. This was a huge accident, and it is very, very well known, especially in our school and around the area. Everybody knows about it. And these were the two pilots. It was Captain Marvin Renslow. He's 47, and first officer was Rebecca Shaw. She was 24. And there were problems given with both of them. A lot of people had said that Captain Renslow had not had proper training, and he had some proficiency problems when he had been working towards it. And Rebecca Shaw, at the time, after they got the black box and were able to look at some of the past comms, was sick and also heavily fatigued. But she was working hard because she was living with her parents at the time and really needed the money. So she was being way overworked. She was pushing herself way too hard and was not prepared and not in a state to do a flight like this. Here I have a simulation of how the flight went down. Around a minute 30, it'll start showing. Around this time was when the Colgan Air flight, they were cleared for the ILS into runway 32. It should be popping up here in a second. And they were cleared for the approach. They did everything right. They communicated back to ATC. They figured it out. They put their gear down. They started putting their flaps down. And then they, as you see here, approach told them to contact tower on 120.5. And this was the last communication they had with Colgan Air. Let me put it back to where it was. And so they were told to contact the tower, and the pilots did, as they were professional pilots, they did what they were supposed to do. Gear came down, they went over to the tower, they did everything right, and then here in a second is where problems start coming in, and they come in rapidly. You see the speed sinking, it's down to 140 knots, quickly going down to 135, setting flaps to 15, now they're in the red zone, and the first thing the pilot does is he starts to pull back. He's pulling back on the throttle, which brings the plane up, increases the angle of attack, and causes a stall. And the pusher and shaker here, they lead. Their job is to lead the yoke down, so it decreases angle of attack, causes the plane not to stall. But the captain was canceling out the corrective actions being made by the plane itself, and he was actually still continuing to pull back. And meanwhile, the first officer, without saying anything, she did end up saying something, but just retracted all of the flaps and brought him back in, which made it even harder for the captain to recover. And so at this point, you can tell they're both probably freaking out. Gears coming up, they're coming down, and they just completely crash into the ground. And you can see how quickly that happened and how fast it went from normal approach, everybody's feeling good, to a terrible tragedy. And that is why they needed the regulations that were put in place and why these upgrades needed to come in. And CFR 14 CFR 61 160 is a huge necessity and lifesaver in the aviation community.